And welcome to the show. This is the very first episode of the podcast, Legends of Reed. My name is Jo Anne Sukumaran, and today I'm so pleased to have our guest, Bram van Sambeek. He's a very special bassoonist who has made a lot of unusual choices. Welcome to the show, Bram. Could you please introduce yourself?
I'm a bassoonist, obviously. I have an orchestral career that seems already quite far away in the Rotterdam Philharmonic. He used to play also regularly in London Symphony and Malay Chamber Orchestra. But this mostly was between 2000 and 2010. And then I started focusing a little bit more on chamber music and solo playing. And recently the teaching activities have been substantially increased because of my professorship in Cologne, which was a full class I inherited immediately from Georg Klutsch. So that's pretty intense teaching since this year.
It's wonderful to hear about the appointment in Cologne. I'm also very happy to hear about your nomination of the Fagerlund and Aho Concertos. The album has been nominated by BBC Music Magazine, the Concetta Award. Were you surprised by this news?
Well, I was a little bit surprised also to find my CD alongside the other nominations for the concertos, which was a disc with the Mozart violin concertos, if I'm correct, and Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, or the Bach family on fortepiano. So yeah, it's kind of course it makes you think when your CD is standing there with composers like Aho and Sebastian Fagerlund amongst composers Mozart and Bach, which makes you think, wow, how am I going to compete with that? And it's a great honor, and I am really happy about the recognition in a way that, you know, the appreciation for something that I did really practice hard for, I have to say.
Yeah, definitely. I read on your blog that you actually practiced so hard that your nose was bleeding. So well deserved for this nomination. Could you explain how you paired these two composers on this album?
That has a lot to do with my desire to play Kalevi Aho's concerto already since a long time. It was initially written for Benze Bugani in 2005, if I'm correct, and I saw the score and I realized that this must be really fantastic to play. It's absolutely huge, it's epic. As an orchestra musician, I enjoyed always this greatness of the Mahler symphonies, for example, or Shostakovich, or the big symphonic works. And I thought that this work would be a fantastic kind of combination between this largeness, this really symphonic world, combined with a real concerto. And I was really happy that was a right guess, actually. Because it really has everything. It has these really large orchestral passages, and then there are these really more individual solo passages where the orchestra really enhances the bassoon part. In fact, the Kalevi has a fantastic way of instrumentating, so that you actually never feel covered by that huge orchestra that is playing there. And then the combination with Fagerlund's work was also a natural one, also from the Bis label perspective, because the Bis is really a label that really brings forward a little bit more unusual stuff, and they support Kalevi Aho and Sebastian Fagerlund really very well. So they try, in fact, to record most of their works. So this idea to commission Sebastian Fagerlund started, and I met him. I went on an epic bike ride to go meet him, and he listened to many things I did. He listened to the more adventurous blues kind of things, but he also listened to Yun monologue. And from that he started with the solo piece, the Woodlands for bassoon solo, and then he used a lot of that material in the concerto later. So that was a very natural combination. Two Scandinavian, really great contemporary composers from different generations, sharing maybe this kind of really grandness, a lot of colors in the orchestra, and a very, I always call it white landscape music. Don't know if you can imagine something with that.
Yes, certainly I can hear the vast amount of space in the music, and it's so evocative of Scandinavian landscape, and I can imagine it being a movie soundtrack at the same time. It's really a unique album.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So some people say that you fly the flag for the alternative bassoon, and you lead quite an independent career now. Could you explain why you chose to leave the orchestra and focus on chamber music? Must have been quite a bold or brave choice at the time, no?
Yeah, that's actually, when I look back at that decision in 2000, I think 11 actually, it was maybe quite brave. At that time I didn't think about maybe the financial risks and so on, and that was probably a good thing, because otherwise I would maybe not have been brave enough to leave it. So maybe some naivety was good there. I just went for it, and I never got into trouble. I even sometimes look back at that period where I really had to start working more as a chamber musician and soloist as a very relaxed period, because it was a time where I could just really invest in the new plans that I had for the future. And at the same time I didn't really have too many concerts. So that time really served a great purpose to invest more in depth, because that was something that I sometimes missed a little bit in the orchestra. Although I didn't leave the orchestra from any negative emotions, it was definitely sometimes hard for me to say goodbye every week to the program that I was actually just getting into. So it definitely gave me a chance to work more in depth with the music I really love.
Talking about the music that you love, there was a Facebook video of you playing with two vocals that went viral. Let's listen to an excerpt of it. It seems your broad taste in music and experimentation has led to new techniques for the bassoon. Is that right?
That's right. That's how I see it a bit, indeed. I'm very interested in any, let's say, folkloric roots of any music. Actually, I have, I guess, a quite broad musical taste. So I really like to try to play also the music that I would listen to. This is a step that not many classical musicians, or maybe musicians in general, make. And I just enjoy it so much to just play what I'm hearing and enjoy. That means that of course you have to take the effort to write it down. In my case, I'm a classical musician, so I'm unfortunately quite stuck with the sheet music. But that can also be a good thing, because I'm particularly interested also in performance practice. And performance practice is a term, of course, usually associated with, for example, Baroque and the classical playing. You could think of the non-vibrato playing in Baroque. And that is something in my idea is much larger than that. So, for example, right now I'm working on a program where I go back to all the roots of the of the more standard bassoon pieces that I'm playing. So, for example, you could think of Isang Yoon's monologue. I'm connecting it to a little fragment that I found made on a Korean flute. That is the ancient court music, and yeah, I'm really positively surprised about the incredibly strong connections between that folkloric root and the Yoon monologue, and I would like to involve some of the performance practice of that folkloric side in the Yoon. I think there are enough indications also from the composer himself that he still thinks along those lines in terms of sound world, and I find it very interesting to broaden my technique in the sense that you make the vibrato the same way as that flute player does it. Also, there seems to be a national pride in Korea about the incredible variety of vibrato and glissandi. So this is really something that fascinates me and that I enjoy, writing down all the nuances and then try to find a way on the bassoon to achieve that as well, and that leads to interesting results, I find. One of the things would be, maybe an example would be that we talk a lot about vibrato, of course, in the classical music world, and as bassoonists also. But because of these kind of apps like the Amazing Slow Downer, if you listen closely to really slow versions of many wind players playing vibrato, you realize that most of the vibrato is under the tone and not so much above the tone. Even though this is sometimes being stated, like, here I vibrate above the tone. Well, actually, if you listen closely, it's still really largely under it. And that's a difference in that Korean folk music. You can hear that it's clearly above the tone, and that's actually really hard to achieve with the bassoon. You may need special fingerings, pressing keys really slowly, like glissandi nearly, to actually go up in pitch. So that kind of things fascinate me, and I have the feeling I broaden my horizon when it comes to bassoon technique that way.
Yeah, likewise. Since a year ago, I've been listening to a lot of Indian music, Sita music, and studying Konakol, which is the Carnatic rhythm from the south of India. And I find it so fascinating because it's so sophisticated. And I was also taking a lesson with a bansuri player from the Indian flute and learning how he ornaments the different grades of the scale. And I'm trying to find this similar language for the bassoon, and I find it so much fun, and I really enjoy it to look for these new techniques too myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fantastic to be busy with that kind of performance practices that are actually evolving for centuries or sometimes thousands of years. So there's something extremely sophisticated about it. So to learn all these techniques, to be able to apply it on the bassoon, I think you have to be interested in it as a bassoonist, but even for the people that are not necessarily interested to play such extreme styles, I think it really gives a healthy perspective to what actually your normal vibrato or glissando or pitch should be.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. You having some distance and perspective usually helps us to grow as a musician and become more well-rounded. Speaking of which, I remember last summer we were doing a lesson and I was playing Vivaldi Concerto, and you had some issues with the edition of the piece I was playing, and I was thinking that you were going to throw my piece out of the window. And fast forward, I found that you actually discovered an unknown bassoon concerto because you insisted for the original manuscripts from the Stockholm Library. Could you tell us this story? It's quite funny, right?
Yeah, it was definitely by chance. Yeah, that's a funny story because I recorded the more well-known quintet by Dupree for Brilliant Classics on my first CD, and yeah, I always like to study the autograph because I feel quite strong about not using too many ideas from editors from the 60s and 70s, as we very often do. It's a reinterpretation, and I would like to go back to the source and figure that out all for myself, even if the editors sometimes make good suggestions. So yeah, definitely for a CD recording I insist on having the basic autograph material, so I called the Royal Library of Stockholm. Thanks to Bodo Königsbeck Encyclopedia, it's easy to find such sources where they should be found. And then they actually sent me the wrong piece. So I opened the envelope and I find a completely different piece, which turned out to be a huge bassoon concerto by Edouard Dupree as well. But it was a much larger scale work. So the quintet for bassoon and strings is a rather sweet and maybe relatively moderate work, whereas the concerto is exploring really also all the extremes in speed of playing and definitely in exploring the highest ranges. So he was very clearly fascinated by the extremes that actually the bassoonist, his friend Franz Broymeyer, showed off. Of course, Franz Broymeyer was a very famous bassoonist, or maybe one of the first kind of really traveling, touring the world bassoonist that could do all these really virtuosic things. So yeah, you really hear that in that concerto. So that's very interesting. So we made my own edition with definitely a lot of help from my friend. And now it's I had the chance to play it the Philharmonie South Netherlands, and recently with the Gran Canaria Symphony Orchestra. And there are strong plans to record it soon as well for Hobbies. So yeah, that's definitely one of my war horses from the more classical time, early romantic.
Yeah, let's have a little listen to the first movement of the Dupree Concerto in C. Here's a live excerpt with the South Netherlands Philharmonic with Bram van Sambeek.
It's definitely big revolutionary. He did some quite naughty things, and it's actually nice to hear that adventure also in the music. Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure there are other unknown bassoon treasures waiting for us.
Definitely, yeah. I hope. I also hope I'm not the only one, and I know that I'm not the only one. But I also hope that many students are in that way motivated to realize, there is actually more than just the Mozart and Weber, and that will also be the reason why I put the Dupuis on the same disc in the future.
Yeah, speaking about this, I know you've been busy recording in the studio. What could you tell us about your next album? Anything you could share with us, and when it will be released?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I have a funny new band, or it's not that new because in 2011 we recorded this Harlem Nocturne that became a little hit in the bassoon world because it sounded a little different than many other things. And that's a band consisting of double bass and me as, let's say, a bit lead voices of the guitar or lead singer in a rock band, and then a Hammond organ and drums as the more traditional rock instruments. And I thought it would be nice to call that band the Oscillating Revenge of the Background Instrument, because we are musically all four representing an instrument that is usually accompanying or is relatively often found in that role. So it's a kind of a little bit cheeky initiative that we actually do take very serious, and again go into the performance practice of heavy metal, which is very interesting, and again, really a lot to learn from that. The whole idea of recording an album is absolutely different to whatever classical thing I have ever recorded. So it's there's a lot of songs by my youth heroes, Metallica, more recently Muse, and we even recorded a song by a friend of mine who's a singer in a death metal band, Florian Magnus Meyer. He sings in a death metal band called Alkaloid, where we explore the really lowest regions of the bassoon and the double bass to copy this kind of grunt that you can hear in that style. And that's all very interesting to bring a bit closer, where many people would maybe listen to that style as something like, "Ooh, what a noise." You realize a lot of nuance behind actually any of those styles that we are exploring. So we're in fact always looking for refinement also in death metal, and that's very enjoyable.
Refinement, did you say?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, refinement. Yeah, because there's a lot of things that you have to consider when it's about sound. Also timing generally in the more heavy metal style songs that we recorded, you feel extremely confronted with the huge margin that we have gotten used to as classical musicians. In the classical repertoire, we are often quite spoiled, I would say, in timing. A little early, a little late can all be quite fine and serving musically expressive purposes, but in that style you don't get away with that. It just has to be really tight, and if you do something, you really have to know very well what you're doing, so the rubato feeling is very different. So timing wise you can learn a lot there, and I did. And those are techniques that you sometimes can also apply to maybe a quick movement of a Vivaldi bassoon concerto has much more benefit from actually playing it sometimes really, really straight in tempo than looking for really big timing variations. Of course, this is a very general remark, but maybe you can imagine something with some of those really outrageously quick and nearly rock music-like Vivaldi movements that we all know.
That's fascinating. Having some distance and experimenting can lead to some big breakthroughs in one's playing.
Yeah, that's how I look at it. Yeah, so my angle is very often looking from the extended technique. Trying something in the extreme will lead also to an insight in the basic technique that I definitely also not deserted, just to be clear. I didn't drift off completely. In that sense, I really see the strong connections between those extremes and the more moderate thing, the thing that we are used to. For me, the way is just always to look for the borders of my own comfort zone, to look for new challenges and new perspectives.
Oh, definitely, really very interesting. But this is the part where we get to know Bram a bit better. Could you tell us a fun fact about yourself, something that most people don't know about? If you could have a superpower, what would it be?
A superpower. I didn't discover that superpower yet. I hope to discover it soon. But yeah, I think maybe the secret that will be known to the world soon is that I'm experimenting more and more with a multi-effect pedal, which I find quite a piece of magic, and is a kind of external superpower that I'm right now really enjoying a lot and finding a connection with that playful element that I was just describing. But yeah, that's there are fun facts about me. Maybe outside of the bassoon, I'm sometimes thinking I'm such a profession idiot that aside from that, there's there's of course also a whole life, but that limits itself to maybe feeling really a connection to sports. For me, the bassoon and different ways of just moving are also very connected. I always need to move also to maintain that focus.
Yeah, I saw this video of you running on the beach somewhere. Do you have time for some hobbies? What do you enjoy doing outside of the bassoon?
It's quite limited to listening to a lot of different styles of music and reading. I really enjoy reading a lot. And that also again can be anything, but I'm most fond of reading novels. Really something that has a nice storyline. But when I have to tell my own story during the concert, it can be also enjoyable for me to just keep checking all kinds of dry facts, more like an encyclopedia. Gives me the same pleasure to really read.
I see. So now I'm curious. What is sitting on your bookshelf, or what was the last book you've read?
Currently, my focus is not that great that I just read one book, because I'm reading many different books. One is about actually trees. That describe it. It actually won a German prize because it describes really the way trees are actually much more alive and organic beings than we know. But I just started that book. I'm very curious where that goes, but it's fascinating how they are networking amongst each other, those trees. And I'm reading also a book on the different work routines of a lot of different artists. This is a Dutch edition that I'm reading, but I think there's an American edition of which I don't know the editor. But it's a very nice book to get some insight in how actually extreme very often the work routines of different famous artists and writers were. So those are actually not so much stories, but the latest really story for me to read was actually rereading Murakami 1Q84, because I think that's a really nice thriller-like novel.
Very nice. I'm quite the bookworm myself. Are there some causes you feel strongly about? There was something about you saving the earth and not flying for 100 days.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I tried hard. Unfortunately, then I have to take the plane again to America. But I managed to not fly for 14 months in a funny attempt to save the planet that way. I think that flying has just really a lot of impact. So it creates a tension between maintaining an international career and feeling a bit bad to what you're doing that way. I really enjoyed that also. Actually traveling by trains, I find way more satisfying than traveling by plane. So also when I will play the concert in New York with the German Music Society of Lincoln Center, after that I'll go by train to Indiana, which is quite a trip because it's, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's about 24 hours before I reach there. But I'm immensely looking forward to that trip, in fact, because it's definitely a place where I can also work on all the emails I'm behind and all the other things that are not playing.
Interesting. I have some surprise questions for you. I've invited some fans to submit questions for the podcast. Here's a question from a young bassoonist based in New York. His name is Ernesto Balarezzo. He says, "Hi Bram, what kind of cane do you prefer? What is or are your favorite shapers? Also, have you tried the lead singer bassoons or the new Puckner?"
Oh yeah, so basically my whole setup currently, yeah. Well, I have definitely worked the most with Medea cane. I should add that the result with my own machines is slightly different than to what I sometimes see students use of prefabricated material by Medea. So that's definitely a bit has a different result. Then with the shaper, I developed one shaper together with Chris van Os that has been produced by Toon Arts. And so that's something that is a bit it's not really on the commercial market, in fact, but it's a quite straight model. It's somewhere in between 1A and 2 Rieger, the shape is based on a relatively short blade and a narrow collar. This narrow collar for me enables me to be sharp enough in the tenor register, which is usually a bit flat on the older hackles like mine. And maybe I said it wrong actually. I said I should say it's a shorter blade and a relatively wider collar. So the wider collar enables me to be flat enough in the low register, and the shortness enables me to be sharp enough in the tenor register. Sorry for mixing that up. And with the bassoon, I'm in such a special situation in that sense, because I'm quite in love still with my bassoon that I had the honor to buy from Sergio Azzolini, and it was previously owned by Klaus Tuneman. It's the Hackle 11,174, and it has this sound that I really enjoy, and actually a lot of intonation problems for free coming with that as well. That's maybe why my reeds are also made in a slightly different way than we see around a lot. Yeah.
Great to know about your setup. Here's another question from Jung Ho Chang from Busan Philharmonic. Jung Ho would like to know, how is your schedule looking like for the rest of the year? Are there any chances you will return to Asia and tour with the Kalevi Aho Concerto?
Yeah, there are definitely some plans with to actually record a big concerto like that is usually a project that takes years. Right now we're focusing on a double concerto that is written by Kalevi Aho as well. So after the solo concerto, he decided to write that, because I thought it would be a really nice idea to go visit my friends all around the world, the principal bassoonists in orchestras, and to exchange again a little bit more than what I'm used to now. When you're standing as a soloist in front of the orchestra, you can have, of course, the interaction with the principals, but it's really nice way to get even a bit closer and to really cooperate. So there, the nearest plans now for any Aho concerto will happen with the Galicia Symphony Orchestra and Warsaw Philharmonic. That's in January 2019, and so there are many different plans. I will record Mozart, Weber, and Dupree, probably also in January 2019. I will play with the Concertgebouw Chamber Orchestra, a program that is quite big also for the bassoon, because it's this Nucio With the Pregoleti themes. It's quite a well-known standard piece, of course, amongst bassoonists, but it's not often played with the original string orchestra. So that one goes together with the Weber concerto as well. So yeah, there are some really nice plans coming up from now. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds like a very busy year ahead for you.
It is a very busy year since I also combine the teaching positions in the Netherlands and Germany right now. So sometimes I definitely feel like I'm really on the maximum of holding all the projects going on right now. So it's quite a challenge sometimes, but it's going well.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time today. We've come to the end of the interview. I wish you a very productive time in the US and all the best. I cross my fingers for the BBC Music Magazine Award. And safe travels, Bram. Bye.
Yeah, thank you very much. Pleasure to do this.